Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I'm joined by Porfirio Rangel. Porfirio, how's it going?
I'm doing good, Henry. Henry, it's October. It should be
Yes.
fall sweater weather, but it is hot down
Yeah.
here in Orange County. It's like 90 degrees right now still.
Dang. Well, it is warm and hot, actually, up here in Northern California as well. So summer's not done yet, apparently. I am also joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how goes?
How's it going? It's going well. Also, I was gonna talk about how hot it was as my little opener. Yeah, but it did finally cool down, but it was like over 90 today.
Yeah.
Summer part two.
Crazy. It is October 6th, 2023. Yeah, October, and it still feels like summer. Today, we're going to talk some Ahsoka, and
Yes.
yeah, we're going to get into it. This should be an interesting conversation. Okay, so yeah, the Ahsoka series on Disney Plus just wrapped up just recently, days ago, and we're going to get into it. Before we get into spoilery detail, why don't we talk a little bit about expectations? Yeah, let's definitely talk about expectations because this series, more than many, um, felt like some homework or previous viewing could have been really helpful. So yeah, let's get a gauge on how much backstory we all had, and yeah, like I said, expectations. You want to start, Porfirio?
Yeah, so to be honest, when this project was announced, I didn't really care. I was like, oh, this is one of those projects where freaking Disney's just milking a TV show out of like a character. Um, I always had like this really good like respect for the character Ahsoka, but I was never really fully invested in being like, oh, I need to watch a TV show surrounding this character or anything like that. So I was just like, I'll watch it, especially since I feel like uh Disney Plus shows don't always have like the best reputation, of doing well. So I was like, whatever. But I think like when Disney first released a trailer, I was kind of confused of where a lot of these characters were, but I remember seeing online that they were like in Rebels and stuff, and I went out of my way to watch Rebels, and so I watched the trailer after I watched Rebels, and then I was like more invested, like
Mm-hmm.
more interested.
Yeah.
And so I've watched all the Star Wars movies, I've watched Clone Wars and Rebels, and but I can still honestly say I just still did not have like the high expectations for Ahsoka and how it was going to turn out.
Got it. Okay, how about you, Christian?
Let's see. So, I guess I never watched Rebels either. And I only saw like bits and pieces of, say, like Clone Wars. So I knew of the Ahsoka character. Of course, she appeared in Mandalorian season 2 for an episode. So I really didn't know kind of what to think. The trailer did look pretty cool. Um, it had some good lightsaber action and all that, and had some nice mystery. But uh, I guess, yeah, I wasn't feeling as hot about this going in. I think it's like Porfirio said, kind of with kind of the way I think a lot of these Disney Plus shows have been lately received, especially after we kind of railed pretty hard against the last one, Secret Invasion.
Yeah.
So I'll also admit this one had a bit of an uphill battle to
Mhm.
climb. So I guess feel lukewarm, so to speak, going in.
Got it. Okay. On my end, let's see. So I would consider myself a huge Star Wars movie fan. I'm pretty sure I've seen every Star Wars movie that has released theatrically. And I do love many of those movies. On the flip side, when we're talking about Star Wars fandom with gaming, novelizations, comic books, and TV series, that's when I am much more of a casual fan, particularly pre Disney Plus. Like Disney Plus, I've pretty much been watching all the live action shows: Mandalorian, Obi-Wan, Book of Boba Fett, now Ahsoka. I've seen every episode. But yeah, I have never seen an episode of Rebels, of Clone Wars, um, and yeah, a lot of the backstory to this show, to Ahsoka, um, no idea, clueless. I did mention I have seen every Star Wars movie that is released theatrically. That does include the 2008 Clone Wars movie. I have seen that, and that was actually the first appearance of Ahsoka Tano. So I was uh, casually aware of the character. So that all said, I didn't really know what to expect with this show, and I can't say I was too excited about it, but I was curious because anytime there's something, well, with the Star Wars property that I'm not too familiar with, I'm curious. You know, I wanna learn more, and I did have that curiosity going in, but like I said, I can't say I was like super excited or anything like that. Okay, so that all said, let's give the spoiler alert. Not only for the Ahsoka Tano TV series, but for Clone Wars and Rebels too, because we're gonna get into a lot of the backstory and just all of it. Yeah. So, fair warning, you've been alerted. Spoilers ahead. Okay, so let's start with the Ahsoka show. Yeah, like I said, this just ended a few days ago, so it should be pretty fresh in our minds, and we're probably still processing it all. But let's start positive. Yeah, what was good? What did you guys like about this show? Anyone want to kick it off here? Porfirio? I know
I
you liked a lot of it, so go
I
ahead.
have a lot to say that I love about the show.
Yeah.
um I think, I had said earlier, I watched Clone Wars and Rebels. Rebels I watched in the beginning of the year, and Clone Wars I watched kind of recently during the pandemic. So like just even like a few years ago. So it's still pretty fresh in my mind. And this show had a lot of Easter eggs connected to those two TV series. And I was like, oh, this is really awesome. Like I think it's I think I can say with pretty confidence that like Ahsoka is basically um like Rebels season 5. It's hard to say like if Ahsoka is like its own kind of series, but it's definitely like Rebels season 5 because there's just a lot of those characters from that TV show in it. And there's just it had like so many like it was just cool one seeing these characters from Rebels like be live action characters for the first time, but also being like seeing it like again because what's his name, Dave Filoni, he
Mhm.
worked on Clone Wars and Rebels, and now this show, he made Ahsoka, so this was probably like a 360 for him to like make in a cartoon character from the Clone Wars movie that you said, Henry, to now like having its own TV show, you know. So he knows his character back and forth, you know, and I think that like it shows, you know, this Ahsoka, you know, like every little detail about like, oh, Ahsoka would do this, Ahsoka would wear that, you know, like it's just scary accurate how like Rosario Dawson like gives justice to this character, you know. It's yeah, that I guess that's my biggest like the biggest praise I'm giving right now. It's just like the writing and the Easter eggs, the details, like it's just on point. And if you watch those two shows, you're going to be very satisfied with how this show turned out.
Excellent. And yeah, I'm sure you'll have some highlights to share throughout, but we can keep things moving. Christian, any positives you want to call out for this show?
Yeah. I think the first thing that really jumped out at me is the show. Something I've realized I've been missing for a while. Um, is actually just straight up lightsabers. I think that Disney lightsaber fights in, say, like the sequel trilogy, we haven't really were all kind of weak, and none of them were really memorable. Um, and the like the fights and the fight choreography, it's one thing that I think everybody loves from the prequel trilogy. It's kind of big, you know. I think like kind of like one of its biggest highlights, you know. And it's something we haven't really gotten in a while. I think a lot of Disney Star Wars has tried to move a bit away from the lightsabers with Rogue One, and say the Mandalorian main characters that don't use any lightsabers.
Mhm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think like the final fight in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show like had lightsabers. You had this duel between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, but it was way too force like over the top of the force. They were like kind of it wasn't even about the lightsabers anymore. They were just throwing mountains at each other, you know,
Yeah.
and I thought that was like way too over the top. Whereas this one, I thought there was like good lightsaber action. Ahsoka had these two cool like white lightsabers, which you never really saw in live action. Minus that Mandalorian appearance, of course, but you got like different colors. You have like different kind of moves with it. You actually have like there's like I think, and some of the fights she has are like pretty solid. I really like the final fight. We already gave the spoiler warning. So the final big fight between her and Morgan Elspeth, where Morgan has a sword, I thought was really cool. And so it was not, and you kind of got a little bit of lightsaber action each episode for the most part. And I think kind of going off that, I thought it was like visually great. I really liked the
Mm-hmm.
visuals. I thought the camera work was really good, and I thought like the CGI looked really good for the. So I'll start up with that.
Excellent.
Visually great.
Yeah, good points, Christian. I agree with a lot of that. Like, I don't know about the action per se, but I did like the fact that it was like non-Skywalker related lightsaber battles, right? I mean, Anakin Skywalker is in it, but he's not doing like the fighting, right? So a lot of lightsaber action that has nothing to do with Skywalkers, and that's cool, you know. Like we don't haven't seen a ton of that. Um, and then the look of it. Okay, this was like my primary plus for this show. The show looks amazing. Like I really wanted to call out the production design. The production design in the show is beautiful. It looks so cool. Like they built a universe that like I want to visit. Like I want to go to these places, right? Um, like so many awesome sets. One that stuck out in particular is there's a set where it's like this 3D illuminated map of the universe. You guys remember this? Is kind of an earlier episode, but it's like jaw-droppingly beautiful, and just all throughout it looks super cool. And Christian, you mentioned like the CGI was good. Like I couldn't tell what was practical and what was CGI and what was like a real set and what was like computer generated. Um, but it didn't really matter. I just kind of went with it. I was like, this just looks so awesome. And it's just like kudos to the production design people on this show. Yeah. So I definitely agree about the look of the show. It's really awesome.
Mhm.
Cool. Yeah. Any other pluses we want to shout out here?
Yeah. I got one character I think really stood out to me that I'm like, okay, this is really cool. I really liked Balaam Skull, played by Ray Stevenson.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Ray Stevenson passed a few months ago.
Mhm.
Um, and so I thought that he kind of has this almost like anti Obi-Wan Kenobi type of presence in a way, where he's kind of the wise older character, of course, with his younger, more brash protege played by or with Shin. But I thought
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of like this gravitas to his performance. I really liked him in just about every scene he was in. Um, I actually did not know that Ray Stevenson had unfortunately passed away very early and only a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it is kind of sad that, like I said, we already give the spoiler warning that his arc kind of does end on like a literal cliffhanger.
Mm-hmm.
And so because it's just like, man, I really want to see where they take this character. I really like this guy. I thought like he really he had such an imposing yet wise presence in a way. He somehow struck a really good balance between the two.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, to echo a lot of what you said, Christian, every scene that he was in, like Balon, I was like instantly drawn to. You guys talked about the Jedi lightsaber fights, earlier, like the one between him and Ahsoka was like one of my favorite of all time. And I think, call me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there was just two different like fighting styles involved right there. I feel like Balon had like a more like of a knight kind of fighting style. Like he just like there was like a very like heavy emphasis of him like holding the handle and just thrusting like his power from like the handle. Whereas like Ahsoka had like more of kind of like a samurai like swift kind of fighting style where like one she has like a dual lightsaber which she didn't use in that fight, but she's just more like is like I don't know how to describe it, but like can be defensive with it but also be like very like swift and sneaky with it. Like she doesn't rely so much on like power, whereas like Balon did, and more on her like technique. And so it was just interesting like seeing two different Jedi um fights with the lightsabers just go at it at each other. And that's one point I had to bring up, and then the other point is like Balon, like you said, Christian, is just he did give like it like this like older, wiser Obi-Wan kind of like figure, of like he wasn't so much like for the Empire kind of person, like we have to conquer the universe. He had like a motive behind everything he wanted to do. Like at the end of the day he didn't want to go with Thrawn back to like the other galaxy. He wanted to get stay behind because he wanted to like unlock some other kind of like power, or something. And he had like his own agenda, and he even gave like this like a lot of like prep to his like Padawan Shen of like don't rush to get to like a goal, you know, take your time. And I think that just comes from like his training from the Jedi Temple, you know. And so it was just his character, the acting, the writing was just like 100 like percent, like tens across the board. Like it was just amazing. And it's unfortunate that we're not going to see that be completed or continued in the next season.
Right on. Yeah, not to pile on too much, but yeah, absolutely RIP Ray Stevenson. Um, it is kind of tragic. He died fairly young. He was only in his late 50s. But what a gift this was. After he passes, he gives us this performance, which is really great. And pretty cool that the last you see the character on the show, he's just kind of peacefully looking over this beautiful landscape, right? And it's really touching, right? Knowing that he had passed and to see him in this like kind of deep meditative moment is kind of poetic, right?
Oh
Um
yeah, I cried.
it's like, wow, was that pre-planned? Did they do
Uh-huh.
that after he passed? Like it's like just they nailed that moment, right?
The emotions were there, you know.
Yeah, totally. And I just kind of wanted to call out like the primary villain group in the show. Well, in the early part of the show, what I thought was the primary villain group, which is Balin Skull, as you've been saying, but also Shin Hati, his apprentice, and Morgan Elsbeth. Like that trio of villains was very interesting to me. Like they drew me in, and they kind of kept me going. Like they were the group of characters I was most interested throughout the show. So I thought the show had very cool villains. Let's just put it that way. Um, they weren't the only villains, as it turned out. I'll have some more to talk about there, but like early on, these were the main baddies, and I was into it. I was digging the vibe with these three characters for sure. Okay, so as I've been saying, we can continue to throw out positives, but maybe we can start to shift gears a bit, get into some of the stuff we didn't like so much. Any negatives we want to call out about the Ahsoka show?
It wasn't long enough.
Which is like a hidden compliment from the sounds of it.
We only got 8 episodes, and there was just so much story to have been told. I don't want to wait till season two. That's my
Yeah,
biggest complaint.
so clearly Porfirio was wanting more. We did get eight episodes though, which is pretty good. I thought it was going to be 6 at the beginning. So when I found out it was 8, I'm like, oh, okay, we're getting a little more than I expected.
Okay.
But Christian, anything you want to call out?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, let's see. Maybe I'll kind of go on Porfirio's point because I also kind of thought it was a little too short. Um, of course, I think like all well, everything looked really good, and of course, prefer like you definitely really liked it. I think that it being too short, I'm gonna say this in kind of more of my negative way
Mhm.
because I think like Thrawn and Ezra, kind of the two characters that are searching for. It feels like the movie, or I keep saying the movie, the show ends on. It wants to have an ending that kind of leads in, I guess, into like a season two, or Dave Filoni's gonna make a Heir to the Empire movie. Um, but it does feel like it kind of ends at a mid-season climax.
Mhm.
Then
Yeah.
like what would really be a season finale. Like Thrawn is introduced, I think, a little too late for such a main, for kind of this big villain. Like you
Mm-hmm.
kind of barely see him. Same with Ezra. Although I think Ezra kind of like I did enjoy Ezra's performance. Whereas Thrawn, unfortunately, feels a bit kind of like, say, Kingpin and Hawkeye, you know? He's this
Mm.
character they're kind of building up, building up, building up.
Mhm.
And then he kind of just shows up at the end, or actually, they didn't really build him up at all in Hawkeye, if I remember this correctly. It's kind of just a little, oh, that's Kingpin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He gets a little bit more lead in than a lot more lead in than Kingpin. But of course, like, since I didn't watch Rebels, I kind of knew who he was, so I kind of had an idea, okay, he's this big bad. But I feel like you don't really get to see a lot of him, and you don't really get to see much of his plan. You don't get to see who Ezra was. When you first meet Ezra, he's like, "The plan worked, didn't it?" To Sabine, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? What plan? Like, I'm not sure what's going on here." And so I think with a few more episodes, say if this was like 12 episodes or 10 episodes, um, I I think this it would have kind of smoothed over the ending. I think the climax could have been a much bigger moment. You could have seen what happened to Thrawn. Where's Thrawn going? What does he do when he gets there? What's gonna happen to Ezra? Are they gonna get off the planet? Like you're kind of left with like all these questions at the very end, as well as I think it could have kind of helped smooth over some of the fact. Maybe we can get into this later, but this very much feels like season 5 of Rebels.
Yeah.
You know, like it feels like it doesn't explain enough of kind of what's going on and the significance, certain characters, their relationships, and there was definitely like quite a few points watching this. I was very lost
Uh-huh.
on what was
Mm.
going on.
I just really quickly want to chime in. Like, a lot of stuff. Yeah, like I agree with you, Christian. Like, I feel like maybe this is an issue we could talk about later about like all like this backstory of like Rebels and Clone Wars that you need to watch beforehand. But the ending, I actually did like the ending a lot. I felt like it just maybe it's just the cynical side of me, but it just gave me like Empire Strikes Back, like Infinity War kind of vibes. Like the villain got away. Fuck, like now what do we do? It didn't like have like a heroic ending or anything like that. Like what's next? It felt like it was very much like the villain won. Now what's next? And again, I think this is just a cynical side of me, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. So I like that ending, but I do hear what you're saying though, Christian, about like there probably did need to be like a little bit more episodes to just like clarify and um maybe the writing could have been better about like what happened, what events led up to what happened with Thrawn and Ezra and all the other characters, to how it got to Ahsoka, you know, like yeah, but that's my take, yeah.
Very cool. So the whole Rebels season 5 thing, we'll get to that. But we'll definitely get to that. Like the question of how inside is too inside, right? We'll get there. But furthering on this discussion about the end to the show, yeah, I definitely had some thoughts there. Yeah, I like what you mentioned, Christian, about how it kind of felt like a mid-season finale rather than a season finale. I definitely agree there. Um, yeah, it was kind of a nothing really happened ending, right? Um, so Porfirio, you brought some interesting examples with Empire Strikes Back and Infinity War. And yeah, there was kind of a downer vibe at the end of Ahsoka, but I don't think it felt like a big L for the good guys. Like Infinity War, huge L for the Avengers. Um, Empire Strikes Back, Luke Skywalker is minus a hand. Han Solo is frozen in carbonite, and he's who knows where in the galaxy, right? Um, so the bad guys won, right? Here it felt like a tie, right? It felt like nothing really happened. Like at the end of the show, Ezra kind of switched places with Ahsoka and Sabine, but they're all still alive and safe, and like none of them died. Yeah, none of the primary good guys died. It felt like a tie. It felt like a neutral ending, and it really just felt like a nothing really happened ending to me. So I was kind of like, wow, like that's how they're ending this, huh? Um, so that was kind of a negative for me because it was an ending that really wasn't an ending. Nothing really happened. So kind of a boring ending, in my opinion. Um, okay, another thing I wanted to bring out, I mentioned how I really like the villains on the show. On the flip side, I was honestly really bored with the heroes in the show, the protagonists. I know Porfirio, you love the Ahsoka character, and you have a lot more like background on her. So I'm just more of a casual fan here, but just evaluating this show on face value, like Ahsoka, Sabine, Ezra, like I was pretty bored. Like I did not find these characters interesting. I really could not care less about like what happened in their stories. Um yeah, maybe specifically Ahsoka. Um Rosario Dawson is like an amazing actress. What like a filmography she has, right? Um but like look, I mean, I just thought about some of her past work, and like Rosario Dawson in Sin City is like fucking awesome, right? She's this like wild, sexy, like warrior woman, dangerous, like wild card. And like in this show, like she feels like muted to me. Like she's super stoic and calm and like and just kind of boring. Like I'll say it. She just felt boring to me. And I was like, I kind of tuned out in her like dialogue scenes. Like I just kind of zoned out. Like it did she didn't really capture my attention. And yeah, I mean the same can be said for Sabine. Sabine was a huge part of this show also. Um like the way the character was introduced, it was kind of cliche, I thought. Like there's that moment really early, episode 1, I believe, where there's like this award ceremony and they announce her name, Sabine Wren, like come get your medal, right? And then everyone's looking around like, where is she? And then cut to her like on a speeder bike, and she's like racing away, and like they're playing like rock music, and like it felt like so cliche, like, ooh, she's such a rebel, like she's she's like thumbing up her nose at authority, right? And it just felt like, I don't know, like kind of kid stuff, right? And it was just very cliche. And that character was pretty uninteresting to me also. Like and like whereas Ahsoka was just kind of a boring character to me, Sabine was like an annoying character to me. Like I really disliked her, right? Um I took down this note. Like I don't want, man, I don't want to trash this show too much, but like I just got to be honest. Like early on, I was just kind of evaluating the Sabine Wren character, and like I said, I found her very annoying, and I wasn't rooting for her. But then the one thing I kind of jotted down was, oh, she's got cool hair. So it's episode 1. She had like this cool like multicolor hairstyle, and then like not long after, she like cuts her hair. I'm like, oh, the one interesting thing about this character is now gone. Oh man. So anyhow, that's my rant there. Yeah, I so that it's a hard sell. If I can't get into the protagonist of a show, it's gonna be really hard for me to stay compelled, right? And yeah, I had a problem like kind of sticking with the story, sticking with the characters, just because yeah, I found the leads like kind of boring, to be honest.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm kind of with you, Henry. I kind of had the same thoughts. Um, I think unfortunately, I think what it also is because kind of funny is that Ahsoka, her like unfortunately Rosario Dawson's acting kind of reminded me a lot of the prequel movies.
Mm.
You have like someone like Mace Windu. Samuel Jackson is known for giving these 100%, 110% performances. Over the top, you love it. He steals the show every time. But of course, he talks very, very monotone in the prequels. There's a scene where there's, of course, a scene we need to hurry. And they say it in like a very monotone voice, and then they just like kind of walk away. Uh, and how everybody is very, very stiff in the prequels. And this reminded me a lot of that, unfortunately. It it felt a bit too like they really wanted the stoic Jedi. The They wanted the like the Jedi is wise, the Jedi is stoic, um, and in a way the Jedi is emotionless. Um, it's kind of yeah, it's kind of what I felt from the prequels, and then yeah, very unfortunately, it's what I felt here, specifically with Ahsoka. I think they managed to get much more character out of a lot of the some more of the side characters. Sabine, I think Sabine, I thought she was pretty annoying too, but she kind of had a bit more emotion. And of course, like Ezra had this whole like hippie vibe going, which was something, something a little different. But yeah, like it was really too bad that the heroes were definitely kind of more on the kind of blander side, but you had these really like awesome villains.
Indeed.
So this is my take on those characters. Like I, Ahsoka, and I've heard Rosario Dawson say this in like interviews that like a lot of that, I guess like guidance or whatever, that she was influenced from like Gandalf the White from Lord of the Rings, so trying to be like this like older, wiser character, like I don't know if that like helps like clarify like some of that like monotone, like still language that she instills. But I think, she's this at this point of her life, I feel like Ahsoka is much more like reserved and like is more of like a backseat calm character compared to how she was in the Clone Wars and Rebels. Again, I think this is probably like just her at this stage of her life. But I understand where you guys are coming from of seeing her like just be like totally monotone. And Sabine, I'll just say, like, from Rebels, in her Rebels, she was like in her 20s, and she definitely like has this like rebellious attitude. Like she has her hair in different colors in different seasons. She always has a problem with like authority and listening um to instructions. And it's cool to say that that character didn't go away from Rebels, but I will say that she was fucking annoying in this show. I agree with you guys. She was like every decision she was like making of like, like keeping like the map sphere, or like interactions that she had with Ezra. Like I was just like, oh my gosh, Sabine, you're such like an idiot, like even like that one early lightsaber um fight that she had with what's her name, Shin. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just found Sabine's character annoying, and it's it's just so hard to say because I loved her character in Rebels, and it's the same kind of character, but I don't know if it's just the acting or the writing in this show, but at this time I just found her annoying. um but yeah.
Cool. Okay. So few more negatives on my end. So I wanted to bring some logic errors that I found. Um, Porfirio, maybe you can give explanations for some of these.
Okay.
Maybe not. You can take your best shot. But like for kind of like the latter half of the season, I found a lot of like head scratcher kind of moments.
Okay.
So
Give them to me.
okay. So these villains I really loved, like the first half, Balin, Shin, and Morgan. They were kind of sidelined. Maybe not Morgan so much, but Balin and Shin were totally sidelined at the end of the show. I'm like, what the fuck? But and along with that, there's a moment where Shin is hunting Ezra and Sabine, and she finds him. Right? She's like, she's telling Balin, "I found them. Like, let's go get him." And Balin is like, why don't you go ahead? Like, I'm gonna sit it out. And she's like, why? Let's get him. And he just gives some excuse like, it was not meant for me, something along those lines. And like, I was like, why? And it turns out like, if he was with her, they would have won that battle. As it turned out, they did not win, because Ahsoka came, and it was weird because Ahsoka fought Balin, and then kind of to a draw, and then they got separated. Then Ahsoka found Sabine and actually saved Sabine and Ezra. But anyhow, like I was like baffled why Balin all of a sudden just like opted out. He just like, I'm gonna sit this one out, and for no apparent reason. Um, so there's that one. Okay, any thoughts on that, Porfirio?
The way I reasoned that moment was just like that Balin just had like, he was like, like, this is like small little like battlefield between like the Empire and the New Republic or whatever, that he was just like sick of. I feel like he had like his own agenda that he wanted to do, that he didn't want to be part of like this um like good versus bad like uh storyline anymore. And he was just like, like, I want to go, because he kind of explores it kind of later in the season of like wanting to check out like all these like um old gods and stuff. And we could talk about that later, but I think he was just like, he just had like his own agenda of like, I want to go do this, and I don't want to be part of this like petty like fight between like Thrawn's empire and this like New Republic that Sabine and Ezra are trying to get back to.
Okay. That's not
But
bad. That's not bad, because I did kind of get this vibe of like a semi-retirement kind of vibe from Balin later on,
mhm,
where he's like, I'm kind of done with this bullshit. I'm just gonna go
yeah,
stand on the cliff top and chill out.
yeah. That
But
that
okay, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, that's just my take.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I get it, but it doesn't. It still annoys me because like I wanted to see like him kind of take on these guys, right?
Mhm,
Okay. Let's see. I mean, we shouldn't probably go through these one by one, but I'll just throw them out there. Okay. So there's a moment when the big star destroyer is leaving.
mhm.
Thrawn is like escaping, right? And Sabine and Ezra are like, "Oh no, he's getting away!" And it's this huge distance, right? And Ezra's like, I think I can make this jump," right? And so he jumps, and like Sabine helps him make the jump through her like Jedi abilities, right? Which is fine and cool. But there are like literally like a couple stormtroopers just standing right in front of them, and like in my mind, they could have like shot him out of the sky so easily. Instead, they just stand there and just watch him jump onto the platform. Didn't make any sense at all. Yeah, I'll just throw these out there because I mean, there's too many to go one by one. But okay, another sore spot. So okay, yeah, Christian, you brought up Thrawn, how it's kind of an underdeveloped character. And when he was introduced, I'm like, okay, this is the guy they've been talking about, right? And I think the performance is good. It's Lars Mikkelsen, and he's got this cool like gravitas about him, right? Great line deliveries. But I had some problems with this character because, like you mentioned, Christian, he doesn't do a lot. But what does he do? Okay, so the vibe of this character to me is he's kind of like a very kind of proactive, calculated leader. Like he doesn't take wild risks. And his big thing is like resources, right? We don't want to waste our resources doing this and that. But then what does he do? Like, okay, so this is like the end of the season. Ezra, Sabine, and Ahsoka are in full attack mode, right? They're coming after him. And he's like, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna send a squad of stormtroopers to attack them first. And then we'll go from there. This is the dumbest thing you think of. You talk about wasting resources. He sends a bunch of useless stormtroopers, and what happens? They just handily defeat them, and like their lightsabers are just deflecting other shots, right? And it's just a waste of time. Like the whole time I was thinking, why don't you just send everyone and attack them all at once? You got like 4 witches and all these stormtroopers, and like you yourself could attack them. Like, come on, that didn't make any sense. So I was unimpressed by this guy's like planning abilities. Let's just say that. Okay, there's another one. This one maybe you can address, Porfirio, because we talked about this like final battle between Ahsoka and Morgan. Pretty cool, gotta admit. But why was there like a whole squad of stormtroopers standing around them just watching the fight? Like in my mind, like they could have taken out Ahsoka. They had her dead to rights, right? It was Ahsoka battling Morgan basically to a standstill. And these stormtroopers are just like standing around watching. I'm like, dude, just shoot her. Like, what are you doing? Why were they just standing there not doing anything? Any explanation there?
No, that's just stupid writing. I can't justify that or anything.
I mean, go ahead, Christian.
Maybe because they weren't zombies, right? At
They
that
are.
point, the ones that were standing around,
Yeah, because they're still the ones from like
they were still the
the
same ones. It wasn't the fresh squad.
yeah.
My guess is that that's what she was commanding them to do,
Uh-huh.
is that they were under some sort of like kind of dark force. Say they were under a spell.
Yeah.
They were zombies, but they kind of bent to Morgan Elspeth's will, and Morgan Elspeth wanted them just to watch. She wanted to go mano a mano with Ahsoka. That's my explanation. I don't know how that if that force power works. I've never seen that force power before. And I think neither did the characters actually at that point. So because I think they mentioned that after they fought all the zombies.
That's
So
not bad.
that's my guess.
That's a pretty
But
good explanation. Although although I would have liked her to sort of maybe like motion them off or something, give some sort of indication.
yeah, I think that would have been better. It also
Yeah.
is kind of like, the stormtroopers are always useless. That's kind of the meme.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, just one last one of these. This might be explainable too, but a little earlier on, so this is when Shin is going after Ezra and Sabine, and Sabine and Ezra getting ready to battle. And Sabine has all these weapons. She's got like 2 blasters. She's got a lightsaber, and she like hands Ezra her lightsaber. It's like, here, take this. And he's like, no thanks.
Yeah,
And then
I
she's like,
have the
okay, then
force.
take
Uh-huh.
these blasters. Like, no, I'm good. He refuses the weapons, and that was like, why the hell did he do that? And then it's further baffling later when he himself does use a lightsaber to fight. So, like, why the hell did he not use weapons earlier, but then later on he does?
Yeah, I can't justify that one either. I thought that was stupid, just because like, I'm just thinking back to the show, like Ezra he would always have his lightsaber with him, and always want to use it. And so yeah, I don't know. I can't justify that either.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, a lot of these could be considered nitpicky and gripes, but I think all together, like, it led to a lot of frustration. Like, just like it was me questioning, like, why are these characters doing these things? And it just kind of took me sort of further out of the show, let's say.
Mm.
All right. So yeah, let's open it up. Any just general comments,
Oh,
thoughts
okay.
on the show?
So I kind of want to get your guys' take on. I mean, Henry, you kind of already said, but like Christian, like, what was your take on Thrawn?
Um, like Thrawn is definitely a character that's kind of like he was known. I knew him from friends mentioning him in the EU.
Mm-hmm,
I think it's called Heir to the Empire.
mm-hmm,
Is like one of the really big Star Wars EU books that features Thrawn.
mm-hmm,
I think it's a trilogy. So I kind of knew who he was. I knew he was like this Empire general. It was like it's supposed to be this master tactician, and like, but I never really saw Rebels, which I seems like it was featured very heavily in as like a
mm-hmm,
major villain.
mm-hmm,
And I th I don't know. I thought like I did think he was a bit underdeveloped. I'm still not entirely sure what I think of Thrawn.
mm-hmm,
I did think his plan was definitely kind of on the weak side, as I think Henry was kind of pointing out, that it was just kind of this like, oh, let's throw some of this at him. Ah, they didn't know. That's fine. Some of this at him. Ah, that's fine. All right. Cargo's done. All right. Let's get out of here.
mm-hmm.
Let's just leave him behind. All right. Whatever.
Is it fair for me to say, like, for both of you, like, that maybe just like in this show, that Thrawn was just, because since the beginning, like, everybody's been saying, like, oh, like, the return of Thrawn, like, that's crazy, like, that's scary to think of. And then when he's finally introduced, like, you guys are just like, that's it, like, he's not a big threat or anything like that, you know?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
also think it's because like we really liked Balin. You know, Balin, Skull, Shin,
Uh-huh,
Morgan were all really cool. They were such a good like trilogy
uh-huh,
or triad villains. You know,
Hmm.
uh-huh,
they had like kind of like a little bit of everything.
uh-huh,
And I think kind of moving them to the side for Thrawn, only for Thrawn to not do something like really sinister, really evil,
mhm,
really like it just felt it kind of felt like he was just kind of there, you know.
mhm,
He wasn't like this like he couldn't follow up like Star Wars always has known some like really cool villains, you know. And then of course Thrawn's there, you know. He has his history as that. But I think since we never watched Rebels, we didn't really have the same I
yeah.
think attachment to him as well.
Uh-huh. No, it makes
So,
sense.
so um you were like I was kind of a bit like okay, like let's who all right, who is this guy?
Uh,
What's he gonna do?
uh,
And I think it was just like load some cargo. That's it. Load some cargo,
Yeah.
buy some time. All right, and leave. You know, I guess I just wasn't as invested in that, you know.
it's okay, yeah. I guess just because, yeah, like I've watched Rebels, so I know what Thrawn's capable of and kind of how he thinks. And I will say he's a really great Star Wars villain. Like he's the type of person that, like, I guess it's not like kind of what Henry said, like full steam ahead. He's definitely like a um he plays a long run game. He doesn't look for like the short victory. He tries to play like the long run. He is very much, oh my gosh, he's just a really great strategist. He tries to understand his opponent. He looks for their weaknesses. He tries to understand like what is the more like resourceful way, the most like way we could like achieve a win. Like he's the type of villain that does not mind losing every now and then, as long as he knows like it's gonna be better in the long run. It's like, I guess the best way I could describe Thrawn is like it's like playing chess with him, like he knows what his next move is, like 5 steps ahead to get that checkmate, you know? And I think that makes him really scary. Like if you watch Rebels, you understand like oh shit, like this guy means new big um big business, he's a big threat. And maybe it's just not shown that well within the show. But like when he was first introduced, and I forgot which episode, I remember it was like episode 4 or whatever. I had like the chills. I was like, oh my gosh, he's fucking back. Like I was like, and so like every move he was making, I was like studying and I was trying to figure it out, like what's his like long step goal, like what game are you playing, because I just know the character. I'm like, I know he's doing any one of these for like a stupid reason, like when he was like, oh, we lost like 20 jet pilots, like that's an acceptable um loss, like he just has this like really sinister presence to him. And it's really cool because the actor who plays him, um Lars, also voiced him in Rebels. So
Oh,
so
Oh, huh.
so it was again like that whole like sinister like vibe. Like he knows how to play the character. So again, like I was getting fucking chills like anytime he spoke and like had dialogue and had like this like strategy of what he wanted to do. Um, but maybe again, like this is just me having that knowledge of what Thrawn is capable of.
interesting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the more we talk about all this, it feels like this show really is not standalone.
It is not.
Like, I mean, because like there's all this background stuff that Christian and I have not seen. And like it's leading to other stuff too, right? So this whole like mid-season finale vibe, I think there's something to that because like it doesn't really function as a standalone story, right?
Mhm.
Like never mind like Clone Wars and Rebels, like the end of this season doesn't even like pay off the beginning of the season, right? Because like we've been saying, the villains at the beginning of this show are different than the end, right? Like so that I had a problem with that. We've kind of been touching upon that, but like I thought it would have been cooler if they started and ended with Balin, Shin, and Morgan, or with Thrawn, right? Instead, they kind of like switched off like in the middle, right? It just made it like it just is disjointed. And like it just, for example, like in the very beginning, Sabine is nearly killed, right? She has a showdown with Shin Hati, and they have a lightsaber duel, and Sabine is like way out of her depth. She's untrained, and she is nearly killed. Actually, the episode 1 ends on a cliffhanger. It looks like she's dead. You're not sure, right? Turns out she's not dead. But I totally thought that there was going to be like this big rematch where Sabine is going to like defeat Shin at the end. Totally didn't happen, right? So that's like kind of a loose thread. I feel like maybe they're saving that for later when Sabine is like more trained in the Jedi arts. But yeah, just this is one of many examples of this season being like completely not standalone, and it feeling much more like just half of a season, or maybe even like the middle section of a season. Like it really just it is kind of like what I was saying, disjointed. So let's get into that. Okay. The question we posed earlier, how inside is too inside, right? There are a lot of references in this show to previous Star Wars material, primarily Clone Wars and Rebels. Like we've been saying, a whole lot else too, though, right? Like like Anakin Skywalker is featured pretty prominently in the show, so the Star Wars prequel trilogy is certainly referenced. Just the timeline of everything, makes you sort of think about the original Star Wars trilogy, how it ties in. Um, so this is a great fandom question in general, because as we get more content, particularly with like Star Wars and Marvel, I think, right? Disney is pumping out a lot of content. The more we get, like, the more like obscure references we're getting, right? So maybe it's catering to hardcore fans a little more, but maybe it's sort of leaving casual fans in the dust a bit. I don't know. What is your guys' thoughts on how inside is too inside?
Okay, like my take on this issue is one, it's a positive thing, but it could also be a very negative thing. It's a positive just because, like, like fans like myself who've watched Clone Wars and Rebels, can really appreciate like these like small details of like how characters act or certain actions being done. Like, for example, this is probably something that totally went both of your guys' head, is like at the end of the final episode, Ezra has like a Star Trooper outfit, you know, and that was like a common thing that he did in Rebels. Like the first opening scene, you meet Ezra. He has like a Star Troopers helmet collection, and then throughout the show, him and the rest of the Rebels gang like dress up as stormtroopers to infiltrate Empire like headquarters and stuff. So for me, when I saw that scene, I was like, oh, he's gonna wear that suit. So like when it showed him in that scene with him and Hera, I was like, that's Ezra. Like it was a typical like throwback to the Rebels TV show of all the heists that he did dressed up as a stormtrooper. So it's like those small details that I appreciate, but that could also be a negative because if you didn't watch the show, it doesn't have the same effect on you. Like you could just be like totally lost, or you don't have that same emotional connection. And one I feel like can make the same argument, not just for Star Wars, but like for Marvel. Like I feel like they're trying to play this game with like their Disney Plus shows of like right now, with like Loki going on and King being like the villain, in that season. But he's also supposed to be like the big baddie for phase 6. It's like how much do you have to watch to be in the loop of all these this continuing storyline. Is a movie good enough to stand alone? Like the biggest example I could think of is Black Panther, or kind of Rogue One. But even like small Easter eggs connected to those larger universes, like of fans that know those shows and movies, like you're just like, oh my gosh, like I know this, I connect to this, and I appreciate it, you know? Like, I guess even in Star Wars, like the biggest one I could think of is Rogue One. Like that's a complete standalone movie. You don't need to watch any of the other films. But like towards the end where like Layla comes out, you know, and she has that the device, you know,
Mhm.
like that's how episode 4 starts out, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like this is how it's all connected, you know.
Yeah.
So it can be a positive thing, but it could also backfire and be a very negative thing.
Right on.
Yeah,
Right on.
I I definitely agree with that. I think like the big one I was thinking of like comparing it to, as far as one where I'm on one side and one where on the other side, is WandaVision. Which is, the first like big Disney or one of the first big Disney Plus ones.
Hmm.
Um, where, it doesn't say what if it's a sequel to anything. It's kind of its own, in a way, standalone thing. It's just about Wanda, her grief. Um, but like there's so many different threads coming in from other Marvel stuff, other Marvel movies. Of course, Vision's really dead from I get, spoilers for WandaVision. And Infinity War Endgame, but of course you have Vision's dead because he had the Infinity Stone. They have like callbacks to her upbringing. They have, they mention Ultron, um as well as bringing in other characters from other movies.
Hmm.
And nothing about WandaVision says that you need to watch all these other Marvel movies in order to get WandaVision. It just says WandaVision. And of course I really like WandaVision. WandaVision's great. It was like a huge hit, and a bunch of people I know who didn't really watch Marvel movies or all that who were ended up watching WandaVision and really liking it. Like my mom, for example. And so I feel like that's but there's so much kind of leading into WandaVision. Uh Whereas I completely got it. I love the callbacks. I love how it had felt like it advanced the story of the MCU, and it just kind of goes right into it while also having that little bit of mystery because you kind of know where Wanda is at that point, or can kind of guess. Whereas this, I feel like I was a bit on the opposite side, where I'm like, oh, I didn't know this was this. Oh, I didn't, and I feel like I'm a little bit lost on it, where it's like, what do they mean by that? Oh, who are these characters? Why are they important? Why do they need to find them? I got most of the broad strokes while watching this, but it doesn't say rebels, it says Ahsoka. Um, and of course you had the lead in from Mandalorian. You
Hmm.
had and she's kind of this well-known character, she's a well-known character, I think similar to say Thrawn, but like it feels like it brings in so much other stuff that I felt like, oh man, I don't know anything about Star Wars. Who are these gods that the mountaintops are based off of?
Mm, hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That was apparently a big thing
Yes.
on this planet. You know, who are these like what is this plan at the end of Rebels where Ezra's on a different planet,
Hmm.
who are these people Morgan Elspeth really wants to meet up with? Stuff that is very specific to Rebels and Clone Wars.
Hmm.
And I think there was a bit of it felt like it felt like there was like a disconnect for me. Um, also think another example, I think Mandalorian season 2, 3 also very much heavily tie into Rebels and Clone Wars, right? Because you have characters like Moff Gideon, you have Bo-Katan,
Yeah.
You have the dark saber. You have elements of it, but I never really felt quite nearly as I felt like I picked up what I missed very quickly from Mandalorian.
Hmm.
And I really like the two characters. I think the actors did a really great job with those two characters of Gideon and Catan. So I never felt that disconnect quite the same way I did with this show. I'm not sure if I could give a completely definitive answer um why that was, but it's just something I noticed while watching, you know.
Hmm.
Got it. Yeah, man. I will say this: Dave Filoni, who is the showrunner for Ahsoka, he took a very bold stance here, right? He decided to take this approach of, well, we're just gonna like hit the ground running, and we're gonna continue the story from Rebels, right? Like you guys have been saying, this show is essentially Rebels season 5, and that's kind of like that was his approach. It really seems right.
Hmm.
So I had mentioned during our expectations that I was looking forward and curious about getting to know Ahsoka Tano, right? And I did not have that opportunity because I was just thrown into this world. I'm like, who's Ezra? Who's Thrawn? Like, what's going on? Like, where in the timeline am I? And I was playing detective for so much of this season, a lot of times failing. I'm completely clueless. Some of it I was able to piece together. It's like, oh wait, that's a reference to Order 66. I get that. I get that. Or like, oh wait, this is like post Jedi,
You're like
pre
you're
Force
like
Awakens. Like,
you're like Steve Rogers and I once seeing in Avengers. I
yes,
understand the reference.
yes, exactly. Like, I got that. But yeah, that my curiosity for this Ahsoka character just turned into like me scrambling to figure out what was going on. Um, so yeah, I mean, I will say this: it is kind of a kind of a bold move. Like I was saying, like he just took this approach, which was a little different, like he decided to say, you know what, we're not gonna do the backstory thing. We're
Hmm.
just gonna go. We're just gonna move. We're just gonna move the story along.
Hmm.
And if you gotta look shit up on Google, then that's what you gotta do. Um, okay, and then for me, the bottom line is I've been thinking about this a bit, but it kind of goes back to something we've talked a lot about, and that's fan service, right? So a lot of the Easter eggs and the references in this show can be considered fan service, right? They don't necessarily mean much to the show itself, like the stormtrooper disguise we were talking about. To me and Christian, is just like a dude wearing a stormtrooper outfit to
Hmm.
stay off the Empire's radar. But to Porfirio, wait a minute, it's this whole like uh love letter to the Rebel series, and like there's so much more meaning to it, right?
Yeah.
And that's cool. But again, bottom line, like with fan service is great, but it can't come to the expense of your main story, right? If it becomes cumbersome or intrusive, like that, then we have a problem. And I found like that was definitely the case here, where Dave Filoni's decision to hit the ground running made essentially the whole show like fan service of Rebels fans, where people who haven't seen the previous stuff are kind of left in the dark. And it's sort of like fan service gone too far, maybe you could say. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts there.
Mm. Tell me how you really feel now, Henry. I'm just kidding.
Well, so but okay, and back to the question we're posing, how inside is too inside. I mean, personally, I think you can look to this show. Like this show just takes it too far. I mean, I kind of tip my hat to Dave Filoni. He kind of took a risk here. He's like, let's just try this thing. Like, what if we just like fucking don't give any backstory? Let's just go. Let's just go. The fans, the hardcore fans will love it, you know. And it's just, I think it's too far. It's just it's too much not a standalone series. It's just it's too inside. Yeah. All right.
Question, I guess, going off of that. What if it wasn't named Ahsoka? If instead it was named Rebels, Star Wars Rebels, you know, same name as the show. It doesn't really have to say new season 5 or whatever.
Would it have like a different like?
Yeah, would you feel a bit differently about it if it was named Star Wars Rebels?
You know, this is funny. I think this is the same kind of conversation we had about Secret Invasion, you know, like whether or not like if it was named Secret Invasion or not, would we have like a different
Yeah, right.
take on it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, very different reasoning, but yeah, a similar question.
Yeah. I kind of feel like, yeah, like, you know, as much as I do love this show, it is not about Ahsoka. It's about like if Thrawn is going to return, you know. And Ahsoka happens to be on this journey. She happens to be the main character, but the show is not about her, you know. I think maybe her name was just kind of like a clickbait kind of thing, but it would have been a lot more appropriate if it was called something like, oh, like finding escaping the dark or whatever, you know, or like or something like that, you know. But that's not clickbait enough for folks to go in and watch it, you know.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, yeah, I think like, you know, for I mean, this is just my take. You guys should have better answers, but I think, yeah, like if this should have been named something else differently, because I appreciate and love this show, but I think it should have been named something else.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree it would have helped if it was called something different, because there was an expectation. Like I thought I was really going to get to know the Ahsoka character, and in the end, I really felt like I didn't really get to know her. That said, with a different title, I would have the same problems with the show that I've laid out here. So that's my take.
Oh, go ahead,
yeah.
Christian. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask a follow-up question.
Go for it.
It's essentially season 5, but it's in a completely different, say, medium. You know, animation to live action. Now I don't want to, you know, make it say that one is better than the other. Of course, they are just different. They have different styles. They have different, you know, ways, but they're different ways of telling the same story. Story of Star Wars. And so, do you guys feel any? Would you see like a bit of a disconnect there? I don't want to say that any of it was. Of course, I haven't seen any of Rebels, so I really can't speak to any of it. Um, but
Like
it
the
do you,
translation of like the storyline or the characters.
yeah,
So
did everything fully translate? Was there any sort of like disconnect? Do you find any disconnect of it
I think
between a change in essentially a change in complete medium, but still within the same universe?
I again like I think that this show did justice. I think just because again Dave Filoni was part, you know, he was a showrunner on this show and he wrote Rebels, you know, and Clone Wars. So just the fact that he was able to continue writing the show, he's very familiar with this universe, the characters and their personalities, that like it was able to translate very well, you know. Like I said like Sabine has like this like punk kind of like doesn't really listen to like instructions and authority really well. Like that translated from the show um to this live action. Um what's her name? Hera, like she totally had continued this like leadership in the show and continued it in this live action of just like taking risks, you know, even if it meant like putting her body on the line, you know. Um, so I think the show did a pretty good justice of for the characters and just like that storyline from Rebels, you know.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to get your guys' takes on some things since I know you guys aren't that familiar with Clone Wars and Rebels. So, episode 5, when Ahsoka is like in that force, the world between worlds, that's what it's called, with Anakin Skywalker, and they go back to the Clone Wars. Like, what did you guys think of that episode? Like, and I don't know if you guys know this, but that episode was actually shown in theaters.
Oh, huh.
Oh,
I did not
really?
know that. That's cool.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if like what you said, Henry, if this is gonna be this was like an episode that was meant for like those hardcore fans that they were like, this is a big deal. Like you need to watch this on the big screen, you know?
Yeah.
But so I want to know like from folks that hadn't watched Clone Wars and yeah, basically Clone Wars, how did this episode what effect did it have on you guys, you know, if any?
I'll start. I did quite like this episode. I think it's probably my favorite episode of the show. I think
Mhm.
it's actually the highest rated one on IMDb for um
For good
like a lot
reason.
of reasons. Yeah, like they kind of knew like this is the big one. It was shown in theaters. Of course, it's got Darth Vader in it.
Mhm,
And I think this is a bit of fan service done right. I think that you get a lot of backstory of who Ahsoka is in this, and you
mhm,
get a lot of context of who she is, whether or not you really watched Clone Wars and saw her introduction and really saw her grow throughout the show. You get to see her with Anakin. You get to see like this like little mini kid Ahsoka on her first mission. Uh, and you see like these little flashbacks, like
mhm,
I do wish the show had a little, in a way, like a little more of this, or even if this could have almost been the entire episode.
mhm,
Uh, and I think like visually it was really cool. Of course, you get a cool lightsaber battle with Ahsoka and Darth Vader,
mhm,
and I think one thing, I'll is Hayden Christensen. It's really cool to see Hayden Christensen finally kind of get like the love amongst the fans. I think
mhm,
back in the early 2000s, a lot of fans were very, very,
mhm,
vocally against Hayden Christensen. And I think in a lot of the prequel movies, this is a bit of a tangent, sorry, but um I think he actually did pretty well as Anakin Skywalker when he was able to really act. I think I was mentioning that prequel acting being very stiff.
mhm.
And of course, there are a lot of really, really bad dialogue lines in the, no one can really make that sand line sound good, Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how good of an actor you have, the dialogue, I think the way a lot of it was directed was really, really bad and turned out a lot of people's worst performances.
Mhm,
And so I think when Hayden Christensen really got to visually act, especially in Revenge of the Sith, I thought he was pretty good. And I think now, I think a lot of people have really come back to that. You see a lot of people cheering that, oh my God, it's Hayden Christensen. He's back. It's Darth Vader. And I think
mhm,
that's more, it's almost like an appreciation for him. He's finally having his day.
mhm.
So I think that's another plus to this episode. So
Okay, right on.
I did really like it.
Henry?
That's cool. Yeah, I liked what you mentioned about Hayden Christensen because it kind of reminds me of Andrew Garfield in No
No.
Way Home.
Mhm.
It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there was so much hate previously, and there's a little bit of redemption here, right? And who doesn't love a comeback story? And yeah, the episode was cool. Um, really cool. Yeah, Christian, you mentioned like, um, wouldn't it have been cool if the whole episode was this scene, right? This
Hmm.
flashback. I'm almost thinking the whole season should have been this shit,
Hmm.
like the
Yeah.
young Ahsoka, right? We've been kind of complaining about like the elder statesman Ahsoka being kind of a boring character. I was introduced to Ahsoka in the Clone Wars animated movie, and it was this like new, vibrant, young, energetic character. Had this like really unique look, and it was exciting, right? And you kind of get that in this episode too, right? So it's almost like, damn, maybe they should have like gone this way. Just make the whole show this stuff. So yeah, bottom line is yeah, that stuff was cool. I enjoyed it. The flashbacks were cool.
Yeah, my take on that one, yes, the young Ahsoka was really awesome. And fun fact, this is the same actress who was young Gamora in Infinity War,
Ah, cool.
and she played the daughter in Barbie, Christian.
Oh,
Mm,
really?
Uh-huh.
nice.
So kudos to her for having a good career at a young age. Um, Two, yes. Or I know for a fact over the years Hayden's gotten a lot more appreciation for his character as Anakin. And I know he's definitely said in multiple interviews he credits a lot to like how his character was written in Clone Wars. Because like you said, Christian, like nobody liked him in the prequels. Like the acting was just really bad, the writing was just horrible. And then like, we get the Clone Wars and there's just more depth of the character, and so when he was reintroduced in Obi-Wan, there was just a lot more love, and especially in this episode, a lot more love and appreciation for this character. And I feel like, like how Hayden said, it's due to like his character just being like fully developed within the Clone Wars TV show, you
Mhm.
know? And yeah, that episode was definitely one of my favorites. I could see why like it was picked to go in theaters. Like it was just a total throwback to the Clone Wars, and it, if you watch the Clone Wars, like you would understand what I mean. Like the Clone Wars is such a really great, well-written TV show. There's a character that was shown in there, Rex. I don't know if you guys know who Rex is. Captain
Mm,
Rex. He was like one of the generals. Like he had like a blue helmet and everything.
okay.
Kind of.
He was a, yeah, clone trooper. He just like the one of the most beloved characters in the Clone Wars. So for him to have like his like live action debut, I was just like, that's like I was like like it was really, I had a fangirl moment. Like it was a
Mm,
really, really awesome. But like above all that, I just appreciate like I think that episode had a lot of what I think was what Clone Wars and Rebels did really well. And that is like the, I guess like psychology and story like script within these episodes. It doesn't like have to be like all like bloods guns a blazing, it get there's like all these like at the end of the day, these guys are people, and there's like this like big universe that's going on. And I feel like the Clone Wars like really kind of shows you how big the Star Wars universe is, instead of just going from like planet to planet. You really easily, it's more like a small area. And I feel like that episode really emphasized on like that kind of um I don't know if this is the right word, but kind of like spiritualism of what those shows were about, you know.
Right on. Okay, so we're going a little long. And man, I gotta say, love it or hate it, this show is sparking a lot of conversation. I think we could go on and on about this TV show, yeah. But let's get to wrapping up. Let's get to our ratings. How would you rate Ahsoka on a scale of 1 to 5? So maybe we should leave Porfirio for the end. Yeah, let's do that. And maybe Christian, you want to kick it off here?
Yeah, I'll start us off. So I think with Ahsoka, I feel like there's a lot of just general context I'm missing with what I saw. For better or for worse, I think there's a lot of great stuff for fans. Of Rebels, specifically Star Wars Rebels, it seems, and I guess Rebels Clone Wars, specifically. And as someone going into Ahsoka completely blind, I felt kind of confused most of the time. Didn't really latch onto the characters as much as I wanted to. But that said, I still think when there were spots that I recognized and uh, the part like the top of some really great visuals, I was having a good time. I I think that it is really 100% for the fans of Rebels and Clone Wars. Um, and so take this, I guess, take I guess what I've said with a big grain of salt with it watching it. But I think I'm feeling a 2 on this one. I will say maybe is I did like it better than Obi-Wan and Boba Fett at the end of the day.
Mm,
Stuff that I did know all about,
Mhm.
characters
yeah.
that I knew all about. But I think maybe it's because I was so disappointed with those series. Whereas this one, I was like, I don't really get it, but I'm kind of enjoying it. So I will say that. So I'm feeling a 2 out of 5.
Cool, cool. Okay, I can go next. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you mentioned, Christian. I too am giving this a 2 out of 5. Yeah, it's almost like there should be two ratings in a way, right? Have you seen Clone Wars and Rebels? Well, then this. Otherwise, that. And I'm in that category, right? If you haven't seen Clone Wars or Clone Wars or Rebels, then this show is not for you. It's just too confusing. There are too many references that you need to have. It's not like optional. There's stuff in the show that you just need to know. You
it's
need to know.
it's not that easy to like fill in the blanks. Like I think it was Christian
Yeah.
who said like you guys did that for Mandalorian, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just too much work.
Mhm.
um Not to say it's a total dud. There are things aesthetically in particular to enjoy about this. Has some cool villains, with Star Wars and a lot of the superhero stuff we talk about. Um, it's tough to have some cool, compelling villains. I think this show has it. But ultimately, it's too inside, and personally, I just didn't care enough about the story or the lead characters. So yeah, it's a 2. Okay, on to you, Porfirio.
So this is coming from someone who's seen Clone Wars and Rebels. I really loved it. It was a really great callback to those two TV shows. It was just like you guys both said, it's a love letter to those fandoms, to those Star Wars fans who have watched those shows. And I am just gonna straight up say, yeah, I loved it. 5 out of 5. it was one of those few shows where I was anxiously waiting 6 p.m. every week to watch it because I was like, I want to know what's gonna happen next. I was really invested in the storyline and the characters and um all that fun stuff. So I enjoyed it, and it is I am, as much as I enjoyed it though, I really just have to put a red flag out there that the show does not do well as a standalone um project. You really do have to watch Rebels and Clone Wars to understand what's going on. And I don't know if I could give that same rating, 5 out of 5, if I didn't watch those shows. Um, so that's a big, I feel like, kind of failure on the show. That's my big red flag. But other than that, as someone who did watch it, I loved it.
All right. There you have it. Yeah. And just to follow up on that real quick, I think it's really cool that you loved the show, Porfirio. And like, I think it's pretty special when you can see a movie or watch a show that really is like for you. It felt like this was made for me. And, we've been talking about, oh, this is too inside, whatever. But if it's like, even if it's like a small group, like if it, maybe particularly if it's a small group, if you feel like, oh man, this is really meant for me, that feeling, I know that feeling, man. It's an awesome feeling. It's great.
Um,
That's cool. And I would even go so far to say that in this world we're in, where we're getting tons of content, maybe it's okay if there's some stuff that is meant just for like a niche group, right? Like there's so much shit out there. If you haven't seen Clone Wars and Rebels, maybe go watch those, then go watch this. Or maybe just, okay, you can skip Ahsoka. It's not for you. I'm saying that. You don't need to watch the show. It's not a great show if you haven't seen that stuff, right? That's okay. I got like a shit ton of other stuff that I can watch. There's just so much content now, right? So there is something special about like these niche kind of projects, right? So yeah, it can be kind of a cool thing. Okay. Lastly, we do love to talk about comic books on this show. And none of us are huge Star Wars comics readers. But Porfirio, sounds like you've read some. Do you have any comics recommendations for us?
yeah, sure. So yeah, one of my favorite characters in the Star Wars universe, Poe Dameron, who's played by Oscar Isaac in the new Disney sequel films, he has his own comic series. It's a 31 issue series. And it's just basically his life, like before, The Force Awakens, and just how he became like a rebel pilot, for the resistance. And it's pretty cool. um it's a fun, like I think it includes some elements from the TV shows or from the movies that you understand. And I guess like what we've been saying throughout this show, like when you catch those Easter eggs that they use from like the films in the comics or vice versa, you're just like, I get that reference, and you can appreciate it a little more. But I do enjoy this comic series just because, again, like he was one of my favorite characters, so I do recommend checking it out.
Awesome. Awesome. Good stuff. With that, we can wrap up the episode. This is farewell from Henry, Porfirio, and Christian.